David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. All right, this video could have been called Clash of the Titans. This has been a conversation that has been incredibly popular, that's probably the right word in this case, on my channel for as long as I've had my channel, because I've had a connection and a focus on Omega watches. And why not? I mean, since I've really sort of got back into James Bond, it was after 1995 when GoldenEye hit, and that was about the time, of course, that the world of James Bond watches went from Rolex to Omega. And Omega was sort of everything to the James Bond fan if you were part of the Brosnan era and certainly the Daniel Craig era. But we have to explore this because a lot of us are purists and we see sort of the older ways as sometimes the better ways. And so I thought I would finally address this whole debate. Now, before we really get started, we've got to start in the beginning because this is going to be a bit of a chronological discussion. Chronological, right? May not be logical, but it's going to be chrono. In that, Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, in the books, let's start off with that, said that James Bond, as a secret agent, as an individual that likes the sartorial, luxurious life of watches, chose Rolex, chose an Explorer, as a matter of fact. So this debate is going to be having a winner or a loser depending on you. Now, I will have my opinion in the end. Don't worry, this isn't going to be one of these debate videos where it's like he kept it so nebulous and he kind of straddled it and he was bipartisan. I'll have a strong opinion in the end. But truly, your point of view is more likely connected to how you see yourself as a Bond fan. If you are a literary Bond, there is no question in my mind right now that you probably view yourself as a Rolex person. James Bond should wear Rolex. James Bond chose Rolex through the eyes of his author, Ian Fleming. And that's because Ian Fleming himself chose Rolex in his everyday life. And let's face it, if you know anything about authors, they put pieces and parts of themselves into their characters. Some of them may say the character that I've created, whether it's James Reese or James Bond or Jason Bourne, doesn't matter. They're not me. There are parts and pieces that are, and certainly choosing those luxurious moments, whether it be food or wine or watches, has a lot to do with the author. So if you're a purist from a literature standpoint, this is going to be an easy one. Now, we have to then dovetail to the movies because as of last count, and I can stand to be corrected. You want to put it in the comments? Nothing's holding you back. Rolex has been seen in not one, not three, but 9 James Bond movies. Let's count them, shall we? Shall we? Let's do like the count on Sesame Street. 1, 2, 3. So we have Dr. No. We've got From Russia with Love. We have Goldfinger, right? We've got Thunderball. He uses a Rolex. George Lazenby came in and he was using Rolex in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Obviously, we've got Live and Let Die. We're going to be talking about that 5513 a little bit more very shortly, but we've got Live and Let Die. The Man with the Golden Gun, he has a Rolex. License to Kill, he had a Rolex over there. And The Living Daylights, he had a Rolex. So up until then, James Bond was a Rolex person. Now, there was insertions with Roger Moore, obviously, for Casio and Seiko, and you had a Tag Heuer every now and then in there. Little dotting, little notices of, Bigfoot sightings of other watches. But in general, the big core watch was still Rolex. So this, again, factors into the debate. What are you as a James Bond fan? Are you, you know what? They never did it as good as the Sean Connery films. The Sean Connery films are everything. Well, then chances are you love Rolex and you're going to choose Rolex in that debate. Now, I have a strange complication Very strange complication, and I'm actually wearing it. So I am wearing a more modern day version of the 5513. This is the no date Rolex. We'll get some nice close-ups of this. I purchased this some time ago. I absolutely love it. And the reason why I purchased this Rolex is because of my affinity to live and let die. I wanted a Rolex watch. I thought Rolex really was the epitome of luxury and I always say horticulture, and people correct me, as they should, like I'm farming or something like that. But just loving watches, like Rolex was just kind of it. And I remember wanting this, but I wanted it to represent and look like something either from the Connery era or certainly from Live and Let Die, because Live and Let Die is one of the first times, if not the first time, that James Bond uses a watch as a gadget. The Rolex was a gadget. It wasn't just a watch. Now you could say that Rolex was perfect for Connery because back in the 50s and even 60s, the watch that a secret agent wore was supposed to be a simple tool, right? It wasn't the Q gadget that they are now, where it has all these multiple sexy modern functions. No, Rolex itself was supposed to be a traditional tool to, wait for it, tell the time. That's it, tell the time. But in Live and Let Die, it serves multiple purposes. It's a magnetic watch. It's a buzz saw, gets him out of all these types of danger. Oh, and by the way, it tells the time. So now you've got this multi-purpose. And I thought, you know what? That's it. That is the tipping point. And at this time, by the way, when I purchased my Rolex, and this is the debate that goes inside my head, now that I've opened it up like some sort of artichoke, I had Omegas at the time when I purchased the Rolex. So it's not like I'm like going to have one or the other, but I said to myself, I really do want this representation of Rolex because that was the tipping point. To me, Live and Let Die was the moment where it went from, oh my gosh, Rolex, Connery's so badass and he's got his badass Rolex, he's got the NATO straps, he's got the metal, he's got the leather bands, he's got all these different accessories around it, and he's telling the time to gadgetry. And to me, that's a big decision-making moment because it changes everything. You have a lot of heroes in literature and in film that wear watches to tell time. James Bond, to Joe Public, the normies, as we like to call them, when as soon as you make your watch into a gadget watch, it suddenly turns into a Bond watch. Bond has that connection and affiliation with gadgetry. So that's why I wound up purchasing the no date. It wasn't because it's got all this wonderful history of being Rolex. I mean, a part of that, you know, it was an aspect, right? It was a flavoring. It was a spice of why I wanted to purchase it. But the tipping point in time, and I told you we're going to go in time, of that jumping over to a gadget watch and also just happening to love Live and Let Die and love Roger Moore. Roger Moore, I was brought up with him. Yeah, I'm 56 years old, so that was my Bond at the time. Live and Let Die is still my favorite Roger Moore film. Love the film, love the seriousness that even Roger Moore, who's seen as campy in some of the later ones, brought to the table. And having that Rolex just seemed like a very serious choice. Think about the Casios and the Seikos that he eventually has, and a little less serious, still very cool. I think they're, again, a moment in time. And now I'm going to keep on this whole chronological time moment because, trust me, it adds fodder to the debate. When 1995 came along, things changed. And for those that don't know the history, let me just talk a little bit about it. Obviously, you had Lindy Hemming, who was doing the wardrobe and accessories for James Bond, who started a conversation, and her idea right from the get-go to have Omega a part of it. There was discussion at Omega. I have other videos on this, so you can go watch those. I won't get into it here because we're in a debate. We're in the middle of something right here. Don't interrupt. But they had to have a discussion. It wasn't just, oh my gosh, yes, James Bond. However, pretty soon after, they made some decisions. And of course, it was probably the best decision Omega has ever made, which is let's get in bed with James Bond. Bad vernacular, but you know what I'm talking about. So they did. And GoldenEye saw an explosion of Omega watches. I mean, many of you were inspired by the game and by the movie to go get your very first watch, and it was an Omega watch. So at that point in time, around the time of 1995 GoldenEye, suddenly Rolex and James Bond became a faint echo, right? It became a shadow behind the momentum of Omega. Well, then you had Tomorrow Never Dies. And in Tomorrow Never Dies, that's where this guy, right, decided, you know something, I'm going to get my first Omega watch, because that was the movie that sent me over the top into the Bond lifestyle. And if you are watching this channel, chances are you follow the Bond lifestyle and you've had to have similar debates with yourself at some time. That first luxury watch that you get is so angsty. So you thought I was gonna say, oh, it's such a joyous moment. It is, it is, it is. But it's a big decision. You know, when you're first investing in that first luxury watch and you're saying to yourself, I've saved up for years, or I'm getting it as a graduation gift, or I'm treating myself, or I'm starting a new job, whatever the wonderful excuse to jump into that world of luxury watches is, you go through a certain amount of angst, and you also think about potential regret. This is psychology, folks. You know, the whole idea of, hold on a second, do I go for an Omega Tomorrow Never Dies watch, or do I hearken back to the original and get a Rolex? And at this point, you should be saying, hold on, Zaritsky, there's different price points, there's availability, there's all these things. Yes. But when you're jumping into the world of luxury watches, as Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. You can shore up and create some efficiencies to bring those price points together, and you do have choices. You know, you could wait a little bit longer to get your Rolex if it's that much more expensive. But no, I made a choice to get the Omega because my Bond was Pierce Brosnan. You know, I'd gone from Roger Moore to Pierce Brosnan. Well, yes, Timothy Dalton was in there. Don't send hate mail. He's grown in appreciation. But for me, Timothy Dalton didn't connect me back to Bond. Brosnan did. And Brosnan connected me as a style icon. That whole idea of emulation. And I wanted his watch. I'm just telling you right now, I'm being very transparent with you. I wanted Bond's watch. And I wanted Pierce Brosnan's choice of Bond's watch. And if you look at the ad campaign that they did, Omega was genius. They put Bond's choice, they put Pierce Brosnan's choice, they made ambassadors out of these James Bond actors, and it just it exploded from there. And that's how I got into the world of Omega. Now, right about that time, when I had my Tomorrow Never Dies watch, I loved it, I started to think, you know something? But don't I love all the James Bonds? Don't I love all of those? And I really started to re-explore, as I got back into James Bond, the world of Sean Connery. Now, go back for a moment. I mean, Sean Connery, the Rolex models, you got the Rolex Submariner 6538. I'm so cheating right now. This is why my eyes are going down. Worn in Dr. No from Rush with Love and Goldfinger. You got the Rolex Chronograph 6238, seen in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. The Rolex Submariner 5513, like I was talking about, from The Man with the Golden Gun and Live and Let Die. And then the Rolex GMT Master Reference, worn in The Spy Who Loved Me. You've got all of these different Rolex moments, but to me, the cleanliness, the clean markings of this more modern relation to those watches was everything for me, because when I think about Sean Connery and I think about even Roger Moore, I think about the clean lines and not necessarily the gadgets. When you look at an Omega watch with the helium valve and some of the other things, and even the way they act in the movie, like in Tomorrow Never Dies, you've got things that light up, you've got grappling hooks, you've got lasers, you've got, I mean, the list is almost endless of the different things. Even to today, as we look at Daniel Craig in his latest film, No Time to Die, you've got gadgetry, you've got the EMP, so it does all these other things. So there is a difference between the two, even in this Bond fan, and I'm sure in your mind, of Rolex has this wonderful heritage. Well, so does Omega. But then with Rolex, you've got these clean lines where I think Omega has a little bit more complication to it. And by the way, not a negative complication, but there's some more dimensionality to even the design of it, at least in the choices that I made. Let me give you an example. So right over here, I have at the ready. I know, it's like, David, really? Again? Again? This is my Quantum of Solace 42 millimeter, and I absolutely love this Planet Ocean. It's amazing. It's my go-to watch. It's my good luck charm, which I've recently talked about, where I take it with me on important meetings or important events or when I go on location. This is the watch that travels with me, usually in accompaniment of some other watch, usually an Omega, if I'm being honest. But if you take a look at the two of these together, they have a lot of similarities. You know, the clean lines, the black face, even a little bit of the sizing. The Rolex is a little bit smaller, but you know, the way the bands are just clean, steely tools. And that's why I love these two. Now, there is no gadget associated with the Quantum of Solace watch that I'm holding. Same with this Rolex. You know, there is the live and let die connection to it from a gadget standpoint, but to me, these represent two very clean aspects. So, we have different personalities. The Omega has a certain, I'll say, efficiency and usage, but ruggedness to it. I mean, it has a lot of different heritage and background on deep diving and doing certain things. And if for the Rolex people out there, obviously Rolex does as well. But I feel like Omega has just a small leg up on showing that type of usage, ruggedness, you know, their association with sports and all these other aspects. Again, Rolex has that as well, but Omega edges Rolex out. Rolex, from a popularity standpoint, meaning walking on the street, if you say to somebody, what is the epitome of watch luxury? And they're not into watches, chances are they're going to say Rolex. But that kind of makes me like Omega a little bit more in that regard, because I am not the person that is attracted to what is popular. Otherwise, I would like something other than James Bond probably right now. Also, I wouldn't gravitate to Quantum of Solace as much as I do. I might go for something more popular like Goldfinger or something like that. But no, I like the hidden gems. You know, I like the odd man out, so to speak. And in that regard, I think that the Omega sort of edges Rolex out. So then it comes down to some functionality. Now, from a function standpoint, we've got very similar things. We've got good water resistance, waterproofing, all those wonderful things. I think it has a very similar essence. I think the Rolex, when somebody sees a Rolex on my wrist, I can wear this with a lot of different things. I think the Omega has a very similar aesthetic, I'll say to that. So as far as wearability in certain environments and situations, in certain events, I think they are pretty much twins. I think that the debate is neutral in that case. They're pretty equal. However, I'm just going to say this because I own both. From a comfort standpoint, the Omega wins out. This is a little bit lighter, but the bracelet on my Quantum is a little bit more comfortable. The titanium Omegas that I have, for example, with a emanates bracelet are really comfortable to wear. And yes, they're more comfortable than the Rolex. So there's some feel and function and appropriateness that we have to think about it. But the number one thing that I debate, and I think others debate as well, is the connection to the characters and which James Bond. And you can't discount this. Now, if you take a look at this and you connect this to Daniel Craig, nobody would fault you. Because there's a connection to Daniel Craig, there's a connection to Quantum of Solace. For that very reason, people may say, you know something, I don't like that watch. I didn't like the movie, didn't like the editing, didn't like the bad guy, didn't like the ending. Whatever the reason, I don't connect to that. Maybe your jam is Skyfall, so you're going to go towards the Aqua Terra. So the brand choice has to connect back to the character, the movie, and the Bond actor that you adore. If you are a Sean Connery person, if you bleed Sean Connery, and when you have a free Saturday or a break in between work and you're watching a Sean Connery movie because that's your happy place, you're going to gravitate to Rolex every single time. And even, I would dare say, Roger Moore, I think you're going to connect back to Rolex as well. Again, actor and movie, they all come together. So, when it comes to the debate of which one should James Bond be wearing, I'm going to serve up what I served up 20 minutes ago. It's you. You are the filter and factor. Are you a Sean Connery, Roger Moore, old school Bond type of fan, and you connect to the heritage of Rolex? Good on you. That's fantastic. I'm kind of the same way. I own this puppy. Obviously, I made that choice. Or do you align a little bit more to the modern aesthetics of the newer James Bond films, but also the gadgetry? You know, the gadgetry that comes with almost every watch in the new movies, you may come to Omega. And nobody would fault you for that. All of the press, all of the marketing, all the events around Bond watches today in an official capacity are circling around Omega because, psst, they have the license. They can do all that. They can do it in conjunction with Eon. They can connect with people like you and I and say, guess what? We have a Bond event or we have a 60th anniversary watch. We are constantly being pummeled by marketing for Omega. And because of that, there's a certain white flag that's waved. I know people that were very into Rolex who have rolled over into the world of Omega and started collecting Omega more because of this. Because of this, for want of a better term, emulation and influence of the newer James Bond. These, and I'm going to use time again. I told you, if I used it once, I've used it a million times. These are moments in time. These are time machines, if you will. This harkens back to an older, maybe even simpler era that we all adore, being James Bond films. I adore, I still feel to this day, as I do this video, Sean Connery was the best James Bond. I've said it. And some of his movies are in my top 5. Many of them, as a matter of fact. So to me, this has a certain holy ground where I think this is James Bond's watch. Rolex is James Bond's watch because James Bond to me is Sean Connery. However, I'm all about today and tomorrow. And today and tomorrow are about Omega. So this is the hard part of the video. I told you that I wouldn't cop out because at this point, you may have already come into this with lots of conclusions. I'm sure I'm going to have a hell of a lot of comments below about which one is your favorite. Which one should be the official James Bond watch. When you go from a licensing standpoint, this is going to hold the cake, but we're talking about the bigger world even outside of licensing. And to me, point in time, this is it. Omega, hand on heart. Look at me go. Hand on heart. Where's your heart, David? It's probably there. I don't know. Anatomy? Is going to be Omega. I believe pretty wholeheartedly that in Bond 26, our next Bond film, it'll be an Omega watch. Do I have some sort of crystal ball information? Has anybody told me anything? No. But I'm pretty darn sure you will see Omega again on the wrist of James Bond. So it really depends on whether you're hearkening back to the traditional side of things or the modern aesthetics. You could say both have won the heritage game, but from a choice standpoint, it's going to be hard. So here's my choice. The things I go back to, the way I've patterned my entire Bond lifestyle has been around the Brosnan and Craig era. Truly. Did I say Craig right? Crap. Did I? I may have to re-edit that. Craig. Yes, the Brosnan and Craig era. And because of that, I feel most comfortable and most affinity going to Omega. So I lean to Omega as a brand, as James Bond's brand. Is it a contractual choice? Is it, a step away from what Ian Fleming chose and what Sean Connery, my favorite Bond, wears? Absolutely. So it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I have to connect back to this because this is what I wear. I have a series of Omegas that I choose from, and I love every single one of them. It's not that I don't love and appreciate this, but I almost feel like when I'm wearing this, it's this hollowed model. It's this wonderful and incredibly opposed museum piece. But these feel like an extension of me. And I think the best watches are an extension of your arm. It's a representation of who you are and what you appreciate. And so I'm choosing in this debate Omega. Let the hate mail fly. One other thing I'm going to throw in just for good measure, and this is just to really get people upset. Not you, but possibly the brands. There is a major, major gap in between the customer service between Rolex today and Omega today. You walk into Omega boutique, you are showered with adoration, appreciation, champagne, loveliness, and good people, really good people that are very knowledgeable that want to help you in the journey of making decisions on which Omega watch. With Rolex, oh, it's tough, folks. It's really tough because you walk into a Rolex dealership and a boutique, and I've walked into several, as many friends are, and it's kind of like, they look at what you're wearing on your wrist first. They sometimes want to know what Rolex you've watched purchased from them before. So maybe you want this one, but you maybe have to step into other Rolexes first to get the watch that you want. So there's that. Sometimes you may say, oh, I'd love to purchase that Rolex, and they laugh. I've actually been in a boutique where they laughed at somebody I was with and said, you can't get that right now. You kidding? That's maybe 1.5 to 2 years we can get you that watch. Like, laugh. So I'm not here to berate Rolex, but from a customer service standpoint, I feel like they need to reconnect on their journey, whether they're creating sort of a limited and, almost that type of luxury position that, oh, well, can you afford it? Can you get a Rolex? Versus where I feel like the Omega it's a little bit more embraceable. No, it's a lot more embraceable. I think it's more approachable. I think it's more relevant. And I think it resonates more with not just the Bond fan, but anybody looking into a luxury watch. You're going to have a great experience, and you should. When you buy something, when you invest in something like this, your experience should be amazing from concept to delivery. Meaning you think about going to a place, you go to the place, you're part of the extension of that brand, you purchase and invest in the piece, and you walk out of there, and all the customer service and repairs after that, they should connect in a wonderful way. These have some misses, even today. Could they get better? Should they get better? Will they get better? I honestly hope so. In a year from now, I want to hear from Rolex and other people that own Rolex that it's improving, that it's amazing. I would like nothing more. I don't like it when any brand has a disconnect to customer experiences, because I think the experience is half of it. I really do. But Omega takes the cake on that. So there you go. I told you I wouldn't cop out and I'd have a lean. Here it is. You could probably tell by my watch box that I lean towards Omegas. Doesn't mean I don't appreciate and probably should wear this more. And also just like the history that Bond has evolved as a time machine of Rolex to Omega over time. Will it swing back to Rolex in the future? Maybe not in the near future, but in the distant future, well, hey, anything could happen, and maybe Rolex, like James Bond, will return. Who knows? I would ask you for your opinion and to post below, but this I won't have to do that. I don't have to encourage you, because this is like diet and religion and politics. You're going to get pretty emotional down there, so I can't wait to read all of your comments. In the meantime, this has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching the Bond Experience. If you like what you saw, why don't you subscribe to the channel by clicking this button right here. We'll keep you up on everything new that's happening in the world of Bond. And speaking of something new, here's something new just for you. because we know you so well. Talk to you soon.